This is the I Heart My Life show.
Welcome to the I Heart My Life show, Tiffany Flaten. I'm so excited to have you here. You are a board certified and licensed nutritionist, and I know you have an amazing journey that you're going to be sharing with our community and our audience that centers around you transforming your health and helping other people do the same. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to share.
So, can we start with your journey to wellness? Because I know it was a long one and there were lots of ups and downs. So, can you talk a little bit about that and then obviously how it led to the work that you do in the world?
Yeah, for sure. It starts so long ago, and I will go through all the details. It could be a super long story, but I'll try to kind of truncate it into concise format here. But I struggled with minor, I guess you could say, health issues from the time I was a little kid. But it really kind of culminated during college when things are heightened with stress and you got a lot of pressures on you. And my main symptoms were the fatigue that was just debilitating. I struggled with mood, with depression and anxiety. I'd had migraines. I had all kinds of things that just were always sort of passed off as I was getting older, even at age 20, 22, something like that. I was told I was just getting older. Well, this is just normal. Or the other thing was, you're a female, so it's just your hormones, and that's just kind of suck it up and get used to it. So I'm just getting prescriptions and prescriptions and prescriptions over and over and again. And finally, through, several years down the road, now I am a mom of two. I am in my career. And I'm still struggling with the same symptoms, being told the same thing, never getting better, even though I was, trying to do stuff on my own with exercise and nutrition. I eventually was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And in a weird way, I was kind of excited to have an actual answer, something that explained all of my problems, because it does when you look at all the symptoms of thyroid imbalance and things. Even though all my thyroid testing prior was normal, I ended up by feeling worse after going through treatment, surgery, medication management, going to my doctors, doing my imaging. I kept feeling worse and not getting any support in. Now, I appreciate that being a cancer at bay, like that was the main focus for them. And I do appreciate that. However, I needed to function. I needed to be a mom. I needed to be able to show up in my life and actually enjoying it. And I was not able to. I was not, because of that debilitating fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, the same stuff that was there prior. So I had to kind of dig in and do it on my own. And when I asked my doctors, what about my nutrition could I improve to help myself? And when they told me food doesn't affect how you feel, then I knew that was my place to start, right? I knew that that's what I needed to do. So I dug in, and I'd already been interested in this. I already had a background in it with my undergrad education, already been a big part of my life. So I just dug in a different way from more of a functional perspective. And that was game changer for me. That changed everything. So it just went from there, and it didn't stop. But it was a long, long journey, frustrating one too.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. So, just for people listening, because I know even within my family, there's certain relatives who have been having issues, but every time they get a test, it says their thyroid is fine. And so, how did you know that, like, what was it that prompted the test for thyroid cancer? And how could a thyroid test be fine, but then you have thyroid cancer? Not understanding.
Me either. Still to this day, there's not a lot of explanation from that. But the only reason that I, figured this out was because I went to my annual physical, of which I was going to get refills of all of my allergy meds, my anxiety med. I was going to refills of all of that stuff. But she palpated my neck. You know how they touch your neck? And she's like, "You got a little lump here. But don't worry, 98% of these are benign. It's not a big deal." But I left that appointment and I was like, I know in my heart of hearts that this is thyroid cancer. I just knew. And what I was told by my doctors that were dealing with the cancer, they said that thyroid testing and thyroid cancer don't correlate usually. So it was truly that physical assessment that was the one thing that got it. And then it was not diagnosed on the first ultrasound in my local area. it didn't show up. But then I went to more of a world renowned facility and they did their own. This was like 2 weeks later, and they diagnosed it based on the ultrasound and fine needle aspect and things like that. But still, the only test that was ever done, let's just make that clear, was a TSH of the thyroid stimulating hormone. When there is a full panel of thyroid markers that can be looked at, none of that was ever looked at. And that's why so many people have normal thyroid tests. And that's why people still struggle. So I think if there would have been other markers checked, I probably would have been more alert or more in tune to that.
It's crazy. So talk a little bit about what happened next, because I know that you did transform your health. So what were some of the steps that you took specifically around nutrition or the other areas that the doctor said were necessarily going to be correlated or support you? What were some of the things that you did?
So the first thing I did was I advocated for myself as far as different medication. I knew I needed medication now because now I don't have a thyroid gland, period. So I knew I needed medication, but I thought I needed maybe a combo, and I was not allowed that at the one facility. And so I went to another one and got the right, the start of the right medication there. I was just allowed that, which was frustrated. I had to beg for 3 years to get that for me, just to try a little tiny bit. And that started to just open my eyes a little bit, opened the opportunity like, okay, I'm not crazy. I can actually start to feel better. I'm not just supposed to, this is my new normal kind of thought process. So that was the first step, is just really advocating despite what everybody was telling me. And then specifically with the nutrition, I got back to basics. And I shut out all the food rules, all the things that you've heard, low carb, low cal, low fat, low whatever, keto, not keto. I just went back to basics. Like, let's look at our protein, our fats, and our carbohydrates. And I started putting those together in containers throughout the day and stopped eating several meals a day to keep my metabolism up. That's sort of another food rule we've heard. And once I started to do that, I started to level out my blood sugar, which still to this day, it has never been a huge impact as far as like being diagnosed with something pre-diabetic or anything like that. But just even that. So even if you're listening to this and you have normal blood sugars and other numbers, there are still ways to optimize that. And I did that by balancing out the proteins, fats, and carbs. And with that, that started to lift my mood. And then with that, I was able to like step into the next step of what I could do to help myself feel better. And it was all just a very step by step, very basic, long process. It wasn't overnight, but when the big steps happen or the big things change, that part seemed kind of overnight. I was just like, wow, that's it. That's all it took. A pretty real food 3-4 times a day instead of, jump things or power this or protein that, bars or whatever, 6 times a day. That's all it took. And it starts to get to be easier when you just get back to the basics.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what you mean by balancing things out? So especially when it comes to the protein, the carbs, and the fats, what did that look like throughout the day? Do you just mean you were measuring how much you were eating, or what were the specifics around that?
At that point where I was starting from, I wasn't even measuring. I was just realizing that, okay, for breakfast, this is just an example. For breakfast, I wasn't eating really anything. Or if I did, it was something as I was racing out of the house. Maybe it was a muffin which is just basically like cake, just designed to be more healthy. Don't know, or kind of we think it's healthier. So it'd be like a muffin, a blueberry one or something like that. Or I'd stop and get a blueberry muffin and maybe coffee from the gas station. So I started to see there's really no protein there at all. And I know from my background that I eat protein for numerous things for my body to function. And so I started with that. So that actually got up about 10 minutes earlier, or I barely still function with my energy. I started making like eggs and topping it with spinach and making a sandwich on like a healthier version of bread even, and just eating normal, basic food and adding butter. God forbid you add fat to your food. So I did that. And it was, I felt better from that time until my lunchtime when I was teaching at school. And I started to notice I had better clarity. I had better mood. And so that's what it was starting with is like eating all the macronutrients, which are proteins, fats, and carbs every time you eat, instead of just eating just carbs, because that causes a spike in blood sugar and then it drops, even if you don't have diabetes.
So good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this is something I've been diving into. I've been following a lot of the experts. Even recently, there was that roundtable at the U.S. Senate with all the incredible nutritionists and people who are advocates for all of us eating real food. And so it's super interesting when we dive into it because it's actually really simple. And I love the way that you described it. It's just like making sure you have these three things and also not eating the processed food. I think what you touched on around not rushing as well is huge because how often are we just moving so quickly that we can't even tell when we're full and we're not even paying attention to our food and we're eating with a lot of anxiety and a lot of distraction. So I think that's also a huge piece of the puzzle.
It is a huge piece. And I think when I'm working one on one with people and diving into what they're eating, how it makes them feel, what I've seen is a pattern where people are so disconnected from their own body. They don't even understand when they eat. I don't know, maybe they get to the season, pumpkin spice latte or something, and they've eaten nothing else. They have no idea that now they feel anxious, they feel tired, they feel like maybe their gut's not healthy, or having different issues with that. They don't even realize that it's because they haven't eaten anything, and then what they did eat was all sugar. They have no idea to connect the dots from what they're doing in their foods with their symptoms. And so that's how I try to really help people, help themselves, because sometimes it's simple. It's just not always easy if you don't know what you're looking for or how to connect it up.
And what were some of the results of you starting to transform your health in this way? So you mentioned mood. So with that transformed, tell us a little bit more about the effects of those changes.
Yeah, so I would say mood and energy kind of go together, but that was probably one of the biggest factors in my improving my overall health, because of how I was treated with providers that I went to go see all along, trying to struggle with my symptoms. I shouldn't even say the last resort, but the only resort that I had was, well, you can start on Prozac or you can start on whatever the medication. And for almost, I would say 15 to 20 years, I would be on one of those medications and then it would titrate it up to the highest dose. And I'm like, this isn't really helping me. Maybe take the edge off a little bit. And they like, okay, how about we try this one? So then I'd start over at the lowest dose of that and I'd work my way up. So that happened for 15, 20 years. Then I got to the point where I was still kind of in that healing phase. I mean, that's a journey, right? But I was still really trying to get over the hump of things. And I was starting to see the cloud lifted, starting to have better motivation, better energy. All this stuff started clicking and it started to just layer mobile into improvements. And I went to my doctor and still feeling a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I'm like, here's what I'm doing. And she just said, well, and this is a different doctor than the cancer doctor. And she said, well, we could do this, that, and the other thing. And I left that appointment with 6 new prescriptions. And that's when I was like, I am done with this. Like, this is not getting to my root causes. I've always been asking, why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? There's got to be something more systemic or organic that's causing, like, what is going on here? And there was after all I'd been through, and she'd been with me on that journey, she was like, this is your solution. Here's some more medication. And so then I think I maybe threw them in the garbage and just was like, okay, I'm doubling down into my nutrition to help support my mood. And I went through a process, again, with her support to pull off of those medications, and it just cold turkey it. And I have not been on that since. That's probably been since 2010. I'm not doing anything since. So to me, that tells you the power of food and the proper foods. And I'm by no means perfect in my diet, like in my lifestyle. Like I'm not this, I mean, I leave my house, I go places, I do things, live a pretty normal life. I know what I need to do. If I start going down that road, I can reverse it or support it by eating differently and behaving differently.
Totally. And let's talk a little bit about advocating for yourself, specifically women. And so I know you've already mentioned a few things. So the thyroid piece, but also depression and mood, and recognizing that this wasn't something you just had to live with. How often do you see clients coming to you with the same sort of scenario or story where they've been told one thing, but you can see it from a different perspective, and then they get an opportunity to advocate for themselves in a different direction?
Yeah, I feel like it's probably 90% of the time people have been through that process. They don't know where to go. Often I'm, one of their last resorts. And it's really sad. And this is a whole other topic of conversation, but the way that women have been dealt with medical studies and even in how our providers maybe work with us is just a lot different than it should be, and it's not supportive. And you have to speak up, you have to advocate, you have to somehow empower yourself, whether that's, having someone with like me to help support and give the person the words basically to use to speak with their doctor, or they have an advocate with them that in the know and knows how to deal with that. Because studies have not, like a woman's brain hasn't even been imaged that is going through hormonal changes. 2015 was the first time that was ever done. But they've been treating us with hormones or not treating us with hormones and never even looked at what that does, to our mental health and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big piece of it too. So we have to be in the know, and we cannot just wait for the system or whatever you want to call it to help us along. We have to be bold, which is hard especially when we feel like garbage. And that's the hard part. But I would say majority of people I work with, they're in that situation.
And what are some of the tips that you recommend for people who are experiencing that hormonal imbalance? What can they do to regulate that or to support themselves?
So first, kind of what I said about what I started doing, getting back to the basics, stop looking outside of yourselves for making it better. What do you need? How do you need to fuel your body? What makes your body feel good? And also really dialing in stress. As your body is stressed out, whether you think it's a good stress or a bad stress, your body doesn't know the difference. And so you need to be able to calm down the nervous system to better go through those hormonal changes. If you don't, going through that process is going to be a lot more difficult and a lot more ring on you for sure. So those would be my top two.
And when you say calm down the nervous system, what does that look like for people?
Well, it's different for everybody, but I would say just if you feel like you have a lot of anxiety, and that can look different for everybody too. But if you feel like you're not sleeping properly, if you feel like you're hyper reactive to things or hypersensitive to things, if you always feel like you're being run by some kind of machine, like your batteries just going like crazy, if you cannot slow your brain down, that's a sign you need to take a step back, calm that nervous system, whether it be through specific things like meditation, journaling, praying, reading, doing more things where you have time for yourself to just unwind. Maybe it's laying on the couch and watching Netflix or whatever, but it's whatever you can do to support your body and take back some time. And I think women really struggle with that because they feel it's selfish. And I think that's why a lot of women have that problem in the first place, or have whatever symptoms manifesting, because they don't know how to take the time back and just maybe pour some of that back into themselves rather than to give to everybody else.
Totally. And, one of the things that I have been looking at for myself personally is, I eat relatively healthily. I don't eat processed food. I removed sugar from my diet a few months ago, actually almost a year ago now. And yet for me, weight loss has always been challenging. So what would you say to someone like me where it just seems like you're doing some of the stuff like what you just described, but the scale doesn't move, or you don't feel like you're able to release weight in the way that you used to?
Yeah, so that is huge topic too, but some of the common things that I do see is how are the adrenals functioning? How's your cellular energy? Are you actually absorbing the nutrients from your foods? So many of the nutrient deficiencies that we have at a cellular level, which is different than, again, normal lab testing, serum testing of your B12 isn't the same as looking at it cellularly. And so a lot of times if we're not absorbing and storing those nutrients to help fuel all our processes, our bodies can't release the weight because the physiological process of weight loss is very energy dependent. And if you don't have the energy available in your cells to be able to, it's trying to keep you alive and keep you functioning with your day to day and your stress, hormone imbalance, lack of protein intake, or whatever it may be, or all of those things at one time. It's sure not going to allow the energy to be just, let's just put this all, this person wants to lose weight. We'll just give it all there and let them lose weight. But they might be, you know, not having brain function as well during that time. Obviously, it's not as simplistic as that, but usually it's many parts. There's many parts of the puzzle that need to be put together to help support the body. But I'd say for women, honestly, yes, can be some hormonal imbalances, but if we don't have our stress management dialed in, even if you think you're due, I feel like most people really don't. That's the other thing. We don't know what we don't know. Sometimes we think we're managing our stress, but we're not. It's just going to make that process a lot harder. And then getting the right thyroid panel, getting the right hormone panel, those types of things need to be done too.
And where do you recommend people go for lab testing that's that extensive? Because I know that I did it through just a nutritionist and someone I worked with when we were living in California. And it was super interesting because he said, what they're measuring against when you go to your normal doctor and get certain tests done is basically all of America, and all of America is suffering. And so he doesn't look at it in the same way. And even if it says normal, like he would prefer his clients who are very high achieving, want to be high functioning, to be at a higher level than what the normal test would say. So where do you recommend people go if someone's listening to this? Can they work with you and then order those tests, or what's the best way to move forward?
For sure. I can help people access the full panel and definitely looking through different lens versus the normal range, which all of America or your demographic or whatever, this is your range that's quote unquote normal. And then I look at them as what's our optimal. How do people more optimally function? And then that can even vary person to person. So we need to take all that into account. So yeah, I can help people access those labs for sure and be able to look at things through that different lens to give them the best chance of feeling better.
Yeah. And what is the test that you do for cellular health?
So I do it's cellular level micronutrient panel, and it looks at about 35 or 38, something like that, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and amino acids. And it's a functional lab. So it looks back 5 to 6 months or so about what your nutrient status is. So I look at the levels as little gas tanks for each nutrient. And if you are low and you're running on fumes on you get 6, 7 different nutrients, we need to replenish or replete those deficiencies so that you just feel and function better if you're running at least 3/4 full. That is the different look that I will help people look where when they go through the results, give them protocols that are targeted and specific to their need versus, and sometimes this works, but a lot of times people will say, I think I have poor energy. I'm going to take a B complex and hopefully that works. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't because it's not the full picture. So this way people can really dial in, like, what do they need? What have they been lacking? And then are they lacking because they're eating poor diet, or is it a gut health thing? So that's, another aspect too.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So I know you have your brand, Rock Bottom Wellness, which such an amazing name. Obviously, you hit rock bottom. I know a lot of your clients have as well. And unfortunately, you're kind of the final resort sometimes. And obviously, we want to switch that up and have you be the first stop. But we know a lot of people tend to go the medical route first and then get the drugs, like you said, and then come to you. So anyway, I'm just curious to know if you can share a little bit more about how you work with clients and what people can expect if they go to your website and look up your packages or anything that you offer.
Yeah, so my programs and packages are usually in a 4-month container, and how we work together, the different containers basically are how much one-on-one time with me, and if someone wants to do cellular testing or gut health testing or things like that. So it just all depends on what they want to dive into. And it's all one-on-one. You get sort of hand holding service, right? And you have access to me 24/7. I try to have some boundaries on that, but it's hard to do. But people have access to me in addition to our one-on-ones to go through all of what they need in a customized way. So that's usually how people reach out to me through my website or through my Facebook group.
Amazing. And I know that you have a meal plan for our audience. So if people go to rockbottomwellness.com/meal plan, you can opt in for that and get it completely complimentary, which is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned your Facebook group as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's called the fatigue fix. And, not everybody that's their first primary complaint, but that's the majority of the complaints people have, along with other things that maybe have sluggish thyroid or hormone balance or gut health or struggling to lose excess fat. And so that's where we go every week. There's a live training in there. People can ask questions. It's just a supportive group with all kinds of information to help you on your path and feeling better.
So my final question for today is something we ask all of our guests. What is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams?
It all comes back to advocating and empowering yourself. You have to do it. I know that's hard for women, and I know that again, like so many other things that'll look different for you, but you have to really dive in and do what you need to do to feel better, and don't let someone tell you that you're X many years old, you're a woman, so you're hormonal, so this is why you feel like this. Don't accept it, because you should be able to feel and be functional for many years, not just because of a certain age or condition. Advocating and empowering yourself to believe that and act on it. That's huge.
Thank you. I love it. Well, I so appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story and all this incredible wisdom. I know that people are going to be blown away by what you've, shared with us and the work that you do in the world. So everyone can check out rockbottomwellness.com to learn more about Tiffany, and rockbottomwellness.com/meal plan to get your meal plan.
Awesome.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
One more thing before you go. I've created a dream life guide to support you if you're in a transition or just trying to get clear on what it is that you actually want. You have a feeling that you're meant for more, there's something else available for you. This guide will support you in getting that clarity and understanding any of the mindset blocks that may threaten to hold you back, and then get into action to the results that you are craving. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide to get this free guide today, plus a bonus walkthrough where I go through all of my framework and the steps that I take to support women just like you in creating their dream life. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide.